Hi, and welcome back to Biblical Theology, Exegesis, and Hermeneutics, where meaning is always context-driven. I'm your host, John Strazicich. Okay, then coming here to our outline, I have updated somewhat a little bit of our structural analysis, and this just shows us where we have come to until today's presentation. So we've already looked at point A, which is the exordium and thesis statement in verses 1 to 6. So we covered here under point 1 the call to attention in verses 1 to 2, along with its basis statements in verse 3. And then the second point underneath this, the exordium and thesis statement, is the thesis statement itself for the Song of Moses. And here we looked at last time the character of Yehovah and then the character of Israel. That was contrasted, and that was night and day. And then under point B here, we're moving along in the macro structure. This is Yehovah's historical benefactions to Israel and their disloyalty. And so last time under point 1, we looked at the past benefactions that Elyon had demonstrated in the election of Israel. And we saw here that it began with a call for Israel to inquire of their ancestral origins in verse 7. And then the temporal clauses began here when El Elyon granted an inheritance and separation and boundaries to the nations according to an angelic standard, and that was following the LXX, and also remember the B'nai Elohim from the one of the manuscripts from Qumran had given, instead of the B'nai Yisrael, the sons of Israel, the standard is angelic, whether we look at the LXX or we look at Qumran. And so the nations were divided and their boundaries set according to the number of the angelic host. And as Qumran says, the sons of God, which is the same thing. And then the contrasting statement came in verse 9 itself, but it said, "But Yahweh, he had separated to himself Israel." So Israel was not relegated to the angelic host, but to Yahweh himself. So verse 9 is really a adversative statement, making a contrast that the nations of the world were separated and given their boundaries and inheritance in accordance with the number of the angelic host. But Israel belonged to Yahweh himself. Okay, so that is what we talked about last time. So now we come here in this historical benefactions of Yahweh to Israel. We're looking today here in 10 to 14 here, Jehovah's present and future beneficial care of Israel. And then we have, we'll be looking here at point A, Yehovah's present guidance and care for the Exodus generation. And that would be the present. So this here looked past, and this here looks present, and it just goes into the future, and we'll be able to see how that unfolds. And so this is where we come to today. Okay, then coming into our text for today, we'll begin here in verse 10. Yimza'ehu be'eretz midbar, uvetohu yelel yeshimon. Yesovavenhu yevo nenehu yitzerenhu keishon eno. Kidnesher Yair Kino al Gozalav Yerachev, Yifros Kinafav Yikahehu, or Yikahehu, Yisaehu al Evrato. Okay, then coming back here to our text, we'll give our translation. He found him in a wilderness land, in a formless, howling wilderness. He surrounded him and took note of him. He guarded him as the apple of his eye, or literally as the little man of his eye. And let me. It would be good just to look real quick here at what does exactly mean the little man of his eye. Okay, so when we come here to this phrase here, Keishon Eno, the little man of his eye. So so in this picture we see this reflection of a man in this woman's pupil. And so the phrase Keishon Eno, as a little man of his eye. So you at times, if you look in people's eyes, you could see a reflection that comes that is on their pupil. And I believe that this is what this statement here means, because this, just as you can see this today, they were able to see this back then. And then the Ishon here, the little man of his eye, would mean that a person is being reflected in God's eye, and that would be Israel. Okay, then moving right along here. So when we come here to verse 10, the text shifts. Because what we saw in 7 to 9 was, past time. Israel was to ask their fathers and their elders, and they would be told when Elyon had separated, the sons of men and given them their habitations. But he chose Israel. He elected Israel unto himself. That was verses 8 and 9. But now when we come to verse 10, he found him in a wilderness land, in a formless, howling wilderness. So this here speaks of the present time, of Moses' own generation here, of their dwelling in Egypt, and then their subsequent deliverance out of Egypt and going to Sinai, and finally then to the plains of Moab, where Moses is at right now, in the last few days of his life here. He composes this song here, and this is basically what Christ gave the Mount of Olives on right before he died. So Moses here, right before he dies, he gives this song and also the blessing in chapter 33, right before Moses dies. But anyhow, so he finds him in this wilderness land. So we're just going to say this is Egypt and the subsequent wilderness wanderings. And then it says that he surrounded him, Yesovavenhu, and then Yevo Nenehu. So these are polels. Savav and Bean here, they take they don't take a peel, they take a polel for their intensifying verbal stem here, and so I would translate this: he surrounded him, and he had an understanding of him for Yevo Nenehu, or he made an ascertainment of him, because being the Cal form just means to discern, and so the intensifying stem here, I don't think it means to take care of, even though that's what they say. So I'm going to look at it. He's made an ascertainment or had an understanding of him. And then following in the second distick, he he guarded him as the little man of his eye. So this talking about how precious Israel is to Yahweh, and that he's beholding them, and he's standing so close to Israel that Israel's reflection would be seen in his eye, as we saw in the last slide above. And so that just really takes us here to show, that Yahweh found him in a totally, wilderness land, in a desert. You can imagine being stranded in the Sinai wilderness and in Egypt. But then Yahweh surrounds him. So that means he's guarded from all sides. And then Yahweh makes an understanding of him and guards him as, the precious one of his eye. And then we have here in verse 11, we have another quatrain here. And I believe here what it is, we have a simile in the first distich. And you'll see some translations that are somewhat divided. They're going to continue the simile of the eagle in the last half of verse 11. Most people, or I should say, some other translations take this as more of a metaphor. And I think I'll be following the metaphoric understanding of the second distich. So we have here, as an eagle stirs up its nest, it hovers over its young. And then we have Yahweh here. He spreads out his wings and he took him. He lifted him up upon his pinions, or we could say upon his wings here. And so this is especially this latter half here, that and back in Exodus 19 that Yahweh said that he had brought Israel upon eagle's wings, to himself, to Mount Sinai. So this is probably an echo of that, an intertextual echo of that being to be sought here. You overhear Exodus 19 when you read this. Your mind jogs back to there. So I would look at so that's good that we take this as a metaphor instead of continuing the language here as speaking of the eagle itself as a metaphor, as a simile for Yahweh. And then coming here to verse 12, Yahweh or Yehovah alone guided him, and there was no foreign god with him. So when we come here to verse 12, it's going to, it's coming before the language that you're going to find in 15 down to 18. Because there, Israel exchanges Yahweh for, they take on other gods. This is a statement that Yahweh alone guided him, and there was no strange god with him. So this was, this is the fact that Israel came to know Yahweh here, and in subsequent generations. And even some of those of the wilderness generation, they had rebelled, and fell into idolatry. And we even saw that in Amos when we looked through that chapter 5, the end of chapter 5. You can see that. But when we come here then to 13 and 14, this here is this can be a little bit tricky in how to discern the distichs, or as I have put here, a tristic. And I'll show you something here from the Aleppo Codex. We know for a fact that the the author there of the Aleppo Codex only knew of disticks, not of tristicks, and we'll look at this a little more clearly. Okay, so when we go back here to the Aleppo Codex, you can see that these lines here, I believe this is verse 7 here, and then again down here, this is, I think, verse 14. What you're going to see here is that this is the line, remember the days of old, Binu Shanot Dor Vador. So, remember the days of old, discern the years of generation and generation. Sha'al Avicha, ask your father, and he will tell you. Your elders, and they will tell you. Ask your fathers, and they will declare to you. Your elders, and they will tell you. That's probably a better translation. But notice here that what they did was that these lines that they obviously they appear long, but they should have been cut a little shorter. Just remember the days of old. That's line A, and then line B is discern the years of generation. Likewise here, ask your father, and he will declare to you. That's line A. Your elders, and they will tell you. So then, these longer run-on lines here in the Aleppo Codex show here that they weren't as refined as what you may think, which is fine. I obviously it just shows that where this particular author was at that time, and you can again see down here, Kenesher, as the eagle, Ya'ir Kino, as the eagle stirs up its nest, Al Gozalav Yirachef, and hovers over his young. So this here could have just been cut in a distic, as the eagle stirs up its nest, line A, then line B is, and he hovers over his young, or you could even say broods over his young. And then here, he spreads out his wings and took him. That's what should be line A. And then he lifted him up, and lifted him up upon his pinions, or upon his wings. So that would be line B. Now, where we really know where things really, really went south is down here at the end of verse 14, or 13 and 14 here, where he has the sons of Bashan, Bnei Bashan, the Atudim, and the and the goats, with the fat of the Kilyot Chitta. This is, and with the fat of the kidneys of wheat. So this line here should have went with the following statement, and then this line here should have been a tristick over here. You'll see how this really gets really messed up on the next page of the Aleppo Codex. You'll see here. Okay, so we're continuing on here with our text. So I think what I'm looking at here is that we're 10 to 14 is going to make up one unit, okay? Because once you come to 15, it's a different unit. Now we're talking that this is talking about Yahweh's beneficial care of Israel, 10 to 14. Once you come to 15, it's Israel's response to that care, which is, why God has spoken this song to Moses, so that the Israelites would learn that they are a stiff-necked people. So when we look at, I think 10, when we look, looking back to 10, he found him in a wilderness land, in a void of a howling wilderness. He surrounded him and ascertained him, guarded him as the little man of his eye. So then what he wants to do here in 11 is that now he's going to then take Yahweh's care for Israel, and then take it to a simile and a metaphor. As an eagle stirs up its nest and hovers over its young, he spread out his wings and took him. He lifted him up upon his wings. So then this here is then getting Israel up out of Egypt. And talks about it as an eagle, stirs up its nest and hovers over its young. So it's trying to get the young to leave the nest, because the mother knows that it's time for her young then to begin to take to the wing. And then the following metaphoric line is then he spread out his wings and took him. So this is talking about God here, and he lifted him up on his wings or his pinions and brought him to himself. You could just put that there, go back to Exodus 19, as we were saying. And then so I really think that so verse 11 really colors and puts a little image onto verse 10. And it does help also to what comes afterward too. I think that this this quatrain here in verse 11 two times it helps understand what he just said, but it also just unfolds in what he's about to say. So we'll continue on here in what he's about to say. And Yahweh was alone when he guided him, and there was no strange God with him. He caused him to ride upon the high places of the earth, and he ate the produce of the field. And he caused him to suck honey from the rock, oil from the flinty rock. The curds of cattle and the milk of sheep, with the fat of rams and lambs, the sons of Bashan, and goats, with the fat of the kidneys of wheat and the blood of grapes you drank wine. So it would be appropriate here, at least especially here in this last distich, is that he's comparing here that they ate the finest of wheat and they drank the finest of wine. So this is the appropriate distich, where we saw where the Aleppo Codex failed to do that. So what that forces us to do then is then in verse 14 with these, remember these discrete units of linearized rhythmical thoughts that make up our distich or tristic here. For each verset, you're going to have a chunk of recognizable logical statement, a thought. Okay, so we can see here that he caused them to suck from honey from the rock and oil from the flinty rock. So when you come to verse 14, it's important here that you have to really think about where you're going to make a tristic. Are you going to try to make it in 14a, or are you going to try to take part of this and bring it down here to make a tristic? But I think it's best here that when you look at the content, the thoughts, remember the linearized rhythmical thoughts will help divide the sentence into its constituent parts. So here it gives us the correct distich, with the fat of the kidneys of wheat. So that's the best of the wheat, okay? Because the best fat would be found on the kidneys. and then the blood of grapes you drink wine. So then that makes really good logical sense poetically here to end 14. And then 14a, we have this tristic, the curds of cattle and the milk of sheep with the fat of the lambs, and rams, the sons of Bashan, and goats. So here you could see that, that we're already here in, it takes up Bashan. So the Israelites are here, and they've conquered this area. Remember Og and Bashan, they destroyed with Moses on the Transjordan side. And they conquered, Og in Bashan, and they discovered that, this was really the best land in Israel for the cattle, for raising cattle, and not only cattle but also rams, and the goats. It's the best grazing land here is in Bashan, and so this is just showing that God caused them to ride upon the high places of the earth, and he ate from the produce of the land, and made them suck honey from the rock and oil from the flinty rock, and then provided him with milk, and curds, and then the fat of lambs and rams, the sons of Bashan, and goats. So there you go. I mean, they were I want to say high on the hog. That might be a little bit, facetious here for Israelites. You never want to say something like that. But because of our, or I would say my situation on this side of the cross, I'm not. I don't think we need to stay kosher. I wasn't born a Jew, and I read what God said to to the Apostolic Council, that they were to take these letters, and take them, and so we knew what they were supposed to observe and what they were not supposed to observe. That is the Gentiles. Okay, this has been another session of Biblical Theology, Exegesis, and Hermeneutics. Please like, share, and subscribe.